Order. I understand the next call is a split call. Moana Maki, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, we're very beholden to the government whip for sitting up in his office with his crayons and colouring in a pretty document for us, none of which changes the fact that the National Party absolutely did not want to get rid of the coattailing provisions. None of them have been able to tell us why the coattailing provisions should remain in place, given that that was the #1 issue under the MMP review for voters, that they wanted to see those provisions go, and we didn't hear anything from any of the National Party speakers as to why the biggest party in this Parliament, the National Party, who implemented the MMP review, then completely refused to listen to those who participated in that review and deal with the single biggest issue for voters when it came to the tweaks that they wanted to see in a system that largely they liked and voted to keep in place at the last election. Mr Speaker, there is much in this bill which is very good, much in this bill which is very sensible, but unfortunately there are a number of things in this bill which are completely ridiculous. And I do want to come back to the issue of the banning of rosettes, ribbons and streamers on election day, because as my colleague Andrew Little said, this isn't about not electioneering on election day, because that's illegal. You can't do that. If that's a concern that members have, is that people don't want electioneering on election day, well, you can't do that under the law. But I would ask the National Party, what about early voting? If that's a big concern, that it's far too intimidating to have all this party colours there, that no one should be influenced in any single way, does that mean that they don't support early voting? Where people are voting right in the heat of a campaign period, are those people being intimidated? Are those people somehow being influenced in a way that is inappropriate? Silence. Exactly. Because they're not. And I sat there wondering, why is it that the National Party wants to ban ribbons on election day? Because it just seemed to me to be completely, it just seemed to be utterly ridiculous. What was the point? And then we had Scott Simpson, the chair of the Select Committee, kindly give us the reason as to why. It's because ribbons are intimidating. It's because that voters on election day will see a ribbon, a streamer, and be intimidated. Well, it's nice to know the actual reason. That is completely ridiculous and just unbelievable. The reality is that they don't have the troops out on the ground on election day that the Labor Party does. They don't have the number of people going around and turning out the vote and reminding people that it's election day and asking them if they're ready to vote. And also, of course, we assist people in getting to polling booths if they're unable to get there themselves. And they want to see, when you turn up on the doorstep, that you've got a Labor rosette on, that they know that you're the person that they've called to come and to assist them to get to a polling booth. Well, the National Party wants to take that away because they say that ribbons and streamers and rosettes are intimidating. Well, if they're so intimidating, then why are we continuing to allow them in the polling booth? Surely, if they're so intimidating that voters cannot be exposed to them on election day, why are they still allowed in polling booths then? Highlights the absolute ridiculousness of this particular provision, because we have early voting now. We are not allowed to electioneer on election day. And if you look around the world, in fact, New Zealand is fairly unique in the great restrictions that we place on election day. I'm not saying that that's not a good thing, but of course in Australia, just across the ditch, I mean, it's full-on electioneering right up till the time that the polls actually close. And again, I come back to the issue of early voting. And as we go further down that path, as more New Zealanders take the opportunity to vote early rather than on election day, then it just really kind of, I guess, highlights the ridiculousness of singling out one day over all the others. So it was interesting to hear the Honourable Judith Collins, because she said that when you go onto someone's doorstep, you're intimidating them. Well, I shudder to think what Judith Collins does on... I'm not lying, Ms Collins.
Order.
It's actually what you said. Actually what you said in response to my colleague's speech was that you shouldn't go onto the doorsteps. Stop intimidating people. Well, I don't know what Judith Collins does on the doorsteps when she's out door knocking. I shudder to think. But I can absolutely reassure her that we do not intimidate people on the doorstep. People are pleased to see the Labor Party turn up on their doorstep, particularly on election day, to remind them it's election day, to help them get to a polling booth if they want to vote. So I think that the Minister really should reflect on the comments she's made, and if she regrets them now, then I'm quite happy for her to take them back. There is much in this bill that is good. As colleagues have pointed out, it's a shame that provisions of the MMP review weren't fully implemented.
The member's time has
but we will be supporting it.
I call Mojo Mathis. Order. I'm calling Mojo Mathis. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague earlier spoke how we're going to be supporting this bill. And for us, one of the highlights of this bill is the provision for online enrolment.